So the not the title, the question was, do you have or what do you know about Microsoft Excel, or do you have any prior knowledge of Microsoft Excel and what it is used for? Exactly. Microsoft Excel is used to create tables, calculations, spreadsheets, graphs, anything of the sort. We use Microsoft Excel for it, okay? So basically, anything having to do with math, having to do with statistics, having to do with organizing stuff, organizing information, we use Microsoft Excel for that purpose, okay? So let me first start by sharing my screen. You let me know if the screen is visible to you. Can you see the screen clearly? Is the screen visible? Okay, so moving on, the same with Microsoft Word. Microsoft Excel can be accessed via the start menu by writing Excel and then clicking on enter, or simply double clicking the shortcut for Microsoft Excel. Okay, now same with Microsoft Word. Here we are greeted with a welcome screen. We can use a blank workbook just from here. We can create a new blank workbook, use one of several templates available to us, or open an existing Excel document. Okay, so here we have the recently accessed or recently opened documents. We can even uh, choose to add some documents to our favorites folder. We will start with a blank workbook. Now, notice that the layout is presented in tabs. Here we have the home tab, the insert tab, the draw tab, the page layout tab, formulas, data, review, view, help. Same with Microsoft Word. The tabs might be different, but the general layout is similar. We can open Microsoft Word for a quick comparison. For example, here we have the home tab. We can change the font. We can change the font size. We have access to change the color. We can change text positioning and everything. Now, notice here in Microsoft Excel, we can do all of that stuff. For example, we can use several font types. For example, we can even change the text size. We can even change the fill of the cell selected. Okay, one moment. So here we can do pretty much a lot of options available for us in Microsoft Word. We can do in Microsoft Excel. We can even go back the same way with Control Z or with the arrows at the top of the program here. For example, we can write anything. Just like Microsoft Word, we, for example, can also print the document. We can save it. We can, for example, even try to save it as a PDF. For example, let's save it to the documents. Let's change the name to simply book, for example. For example, we can use Control S to save. We can use Control P to print the document. Same with Microsoft Word. Okay, a lot of options are similar between the different programs of Microsoft Office. For example, and the main thing that Excel is used for example, let's delete everything. We can create tables, for example. How do we create tables? First, we select a number of cells. Now, how do we select the number of cells? For example, we just click with our mouse, with our left mouse button, and then we drag, we keep on holding the right mouse button and the left mouse button, and then we drag across to select the desired number of cells. Okay, for example, if we want a table with 4 rows and 3 columns, we just select these cells here, and then after the cells are selected, we move on to the borders drop down menu, and we select all borders. Okay, notice here we have a little table. Now there are a number of things we can do in Microsoft Excel. For example, let's say I want to add another row, or just delete or add another row. We click on the number. Now, as you notice, now rows are represented with numbers, like so. First row, the second row, the third row. Once you click on a number, you select the entire row represented by that number. For example, here, if we click on the number 3 here in this ribbon, we select the entirety of the row number 3. Okay, same with, for example, let's go with number 7. We select the entire row of representing number 7, represented by number 7. Now for columns are represented with letters. Okay, now this is the A column, this is the D column, this is the F column, for example. Now some of you might be wondering, now what happens once we've run out of letters to represent our columns? Now notice here, after Z it only does AA, AB, AC, AD, AE, and then once it reaches Z, it moves on to a combination of 3 letters. So you can go as long as you want. Okay, you will never run out of rows or columns to work with. Now, for example, let's try to add a row or column. We just click on insert, to add a new row, or we click on delete, for example, to delete it. Once you delete it, the number just below it will jump up to become the new number 5. For example, if we delete number 2, let's try deleting number 2. Now number 3 becomes number 2. Notice here number 2 is gone, number 3 now jumps up to become row number 2. Let's add another number. Simply we select the desired cells and then we click on borders. Okay, for example, let's insert row. Notice here it inserted it and added to our table, because this row, the row before it and the row after it were already selected to be part of the table. Okay, now to resize, for example, format as above or as below. For example, we can keep the formatting as below, format the same as below. We can even hide the row, or we can choose many different options from the cells. But let's go back, for example, to the tables. Now, if, for example, I want to resize an entire row, I just grab the border between the row and the row below it, just below it here. Once you get this black plus sign with these arrows going up and down, meaning you once you click here and hold, you can resize the entire row. For example, let's make row 3 even bigger. Same with row number 4. Once we have this black plus sign with the arrows, we can resize the entire row. Now, the same with the column. Once we go to the border between two columns, and then we click, we hold the click, and then we move to the right. Okay, move to the right like so. Okay, now let's make row number 3 just a bit smaller, like this. And here we have our first table. For example, you can write anything you want on it. For example, name, and for example, age. Now, why this name had to be with from a different font? For example, we can select a uniform font for an entire row. We simply have to select the row and then select the font and the size. Now the entirety of the settings we used here, for example, the font Arial black and size 14 for the text, is applied to the first row. Okay, for example, age. Let's see, for example, grade. Now, once we move on to here, everything changes. Okay, so we can even select the entirety of the table and then select the font to apply to this. For example, let's use, let's go with this one. Now, these settings are applied to the entirety of the table. For example, age, let's do 28, let's do 23, and 26. We can even change the text positioning. For example, let's select this entire row and then position the text to the center. Same with this one. If you select, for example, only the cell and then you make the text in that cell centered. Now, for example, if we write the data, now notice it moved to the right because the centering was only applied to this cell. For example, if I wanted to apply to the entire column, either to a group of cells, if I wanted to apply to be applied to a group of cells, I select the group of cells like so, and then I apply the changes. If I wanted to apply to the entire column, I select the column and then apply the changes. Okay, now grade 3, 4, for example, this is an example of a simple table. For example, you can use it to organize data to, for example, represent people, places, do some statistics. Doesn't really matter. Anything having to do with organizing data or doing some calculations, some spreadsheet functions, for example, if you want to draw up graphs, anything, that sort of thing is uh, what Microsoft Excel is used for. Okay. Now, do you have any questions thus far, or can I continue? Can you hear me clearly? Okay, so moving on now, another thing that is available to us in Microsoft Excel, another option. For example, let's say I want to add the title. Now I've inserted a line. Okay, I've inserted a line. Let's make it a bit bigger. For example, let's insert a column. Why not? Let's insert column 2, just for the table to be separated from the margins. Now, let's say I want this to be a part of the table, and let's say I want to, for example, give a description of what the table does here. Okay, so what I would do is, for example, here we have three cells, three separate cells, but we can group them into a single cell, for example, just by selecting them and then going to the merge and center option and clicking on it. Okay, now here we can, for example, give it a title or give a description of what this table is. For example, let's go with, for example, let's go with increase the size. We can change the text position like so, and like this it became more organized. Okay, so this, for example, gives us a sneak peek on tables, cells, and their functions. Okay, now for example, let's say for example, if I want to just give a representation, for example, of the numbers. For example, let's add a column. Let's add this to the previous one. Same thing. We just merge and center, and now here we have let's say, for example, let's say I want to add two numbers. Now the content of each cell thus far has been treated like regular text. No, it's been treated like regular text. Now for us to make sure this text is treated like numbers, for example, here we have 5, 5, and 5. For example, if I wanted to add or to use Excel for some sort of calculations. For example, let's say I wanted to add 5 to 9. 5 plus 9 should give us 14. Now, but whenever I move on, it's just still treated as regular text. Now, for Excel to treat it as, for example, let's say, as an arithmetic operation, as something that needs to be calculated, what we need to do is to prefix this proposition with an equal sign, okay? So equal 5 plus 9. Now Excel calculates the sum and gives us 14, for example. Now let's go with, for example, another arithmetic operation. For example, let's prefix this with an equal sign. Let's do 5 times 3 times 3. Now the multiplication sign is a star sign, okay? 5 times 3, and then whenever we move to a different cell or click on enter, Excel calculates the arithmetic operation and gives us the result here in that cell, okay? Now we can even do some calculations in some other areas. For example, let's say let's do an equal sign, and let's say I want to add now this number and this number and this number. Let's go with C11. Now each cell is represented with an intersection of a row and a column, okay? Now C11, notice here it highlighted the cell, the particular cell, the intersection of line 11 with column C, okay? Let's add C11 and B17 plus, oh, just a moment, C11 plus B17 plus C15, for example. Now when we click on enter, it gives us 15, which is the result of adding these numbers up. Now, for example, whenever we change the value of one of the cells, for example, let's make this cell 10. Now, whenever we move to a different cell, now notice here the result changed to 20. Why? Because the content of cell number C15 has changed to 10, and thus the result of the arithmetic operation, which is the addition of C15 and C11 and B17, changes with it, okay? Whenever we make changes here, for example 0 and 0, this should give us 10. Yes, exactly. Now whenever you change the value of any of the cells participating in the arithmetic operation, the arithmetic operation itself is recalculated based on the new values, okay? Do you have any questions thus far? Any questions? Is everything up to this point clear? Have you got any questions for me thus far? No questions. So for example, we will continue with another example. Now we've seen addition. For example, we can even do subtraction. For example, let's go with, for example, 20 minus 11. It gives you 9. Now, as we said, the multiplication symbol is a star sign. For example, let's go with an equal sign. For example, 12 times 3 should give us 36. Exactly. Now, for division, we use a slash symbol. Okay. So, for example, 10 divided by 5 is 10 slash 5. Okay. Everything has to be prefixed with an equal sign. Okay. So once we've in this, it gives us a result of 2. Okay. Now you can see a preview of the arithmetic operation here at the top. Once you select the cell, notice this cell doesn't have any arithmetic operations applied. So it doesn't get shown in this ribbon. For example, this cell has an arithmetic operation applied, which is 10 divided by 5. Okay. Now for this one, it's still C11 plus B17 plus C17. Okay. Now, for example, we can change this to, for example, D12. Let's go with D12. And now the result changes. Okay. Now, once we've changed the value of any cell participating or being taking part in the arithmetic operation, the arithmetic operation itself has to be calculated again based on the new values. Okay. Next time we will see some functions which are arithmetic operations organized, or for example, arithmetic operations, for example, like average, like sum, like a subtraction, like maximum, minimum, that sort of thing. Okay, in next session, inshallah. So, do you have any questions thus far? Is everything up to this point clear and understandable? So yes, I will give you a resume of each chapter on Microsoft Word and on Microsoft Excel, but it will be given to you once we finished the lessons about Microsoft Excel. I will send them to you once we finished with Microsoft Excel to help you prepare for the exam. So, do you have any questions? No problem. So, if everything is clear up to this point, then we will meet, inshallah, next session to continue with Microsoft Excel. And maybe, just maybe, if we can find a room in an appropriate time, we can do a session. We can do a regular session if we can find an empty classroom and an appropriate time. Okay, so we'll meet next week, inshallah. If we can do a regular session, I will inform you via email. If not, we will continue with an online session. So inshallah next week inshallah